The world is changing. Democrats and Republicans in America are battling against each other, and friends and family members are battling against each other on Facebook. The two sides are yelling at each other, calling each other crazy or racist, or seeing the other and wondering how can they possibly see the world in such a crazy and insane way. I'm here to discuss that and the different worldviews through which Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals see the world, and why it is so hard for the two groups to communicate with each other. Hopefully, this will help you, on whichever side you're on, to both understand why what you're saying doesn't help communicate with people on the other side of the fence, and how you can phrase things in order to communicate in a better way. I'm going to start with a couple of different studies, but first, why am I talking about this? What do I know about this? So first and foremost, I'm a cultural anthropologist. I'm an expert in human culture and society. My graduate work was in political rhetoric. I'm also a performance mentalist and an expert in observation of people and language. So we start with a study that came out by Jonathan Haidt. He's a professor from the NYU School of Business. He studied conservatives and liberals and looked at the difference in which they experienced purity and disgust. He gave them different images and different opportunities to see things and rate how disgusted they were by what they saw. The study came up with an interesting finding, that people that lean more conservative have a higher rate of disgust and a higher rate of wanting to be around purity, that they're able to see things and say, that piece of decay, that piece of old food, that dirty thing or that messy room, they experience a higher rate of disgust for things that are outside the norm than liberals do. Now, this says a lot. This says a lot about how the two groups are communicating. If we look at how the Conservative Party is communicating right now, they spend a lot of time talking about how disgusting someone is. This person is going to the bathroom too much. This person has really small genitalia. This individual is dirty. This individual is gross. This person is disgusting or horrible, versus somebody is pure. Look how beautiful they are. Look how beautiful my wife is. Look how beautiful my family is. Look how pure and perfect this is. Versus when we look at how liberals interact with things, they have a lower rate of disgust. In such, they're more accommodating to people that have differences in the way they eat, in the way they dress, in the way they speak. They have a lower disgust rate when it comes to drug use and are more forgiving of that in many ways. Another study that was fascinating was on authoritarianism and the sort of difference between authoritarianism and empathy that came out of a study by Mark Hetherington and Jonathan Weiler. You can look up these books too, they're great books. But the interesting study there was they found that conservatives have a greater sense of authoritarianism in what they want from their political leader. So when we look at the political spectrum, right? Well, let's start with the Judeo-Christian God. Not that everyone in America falls in line with this, or that everyone in the world does, but let's talk about that as an idea. The Judeo-Christian God has two strong sides to this character, or the reality of God. One is that God is punishes those that are wrong, punishes our enemies. Some outside of Christianity would say, I hope karma gets them, right? But this idea that it is the observer that punishes, that sends people to hell for being bad, is our God, is the loving God of us as the individual, but differentiates between the pure and the disgusting, right? And is going to beat up the bad people with a stick. In the same way, conservatives want their leader to be someone who is going to beat up the bad people, is going to separate us from the unpure people, is going to put up that wall, is going to separate, is going to keep us safe from, right? So the authoritarian leader who is going to place religious purity upon people. We need individuals to have a abstinence-only policy, says the conservative, in order to keep them pure, and the authoritarian leader does that. On the other hand, the other side of the Judeo-Christian God is this loving, forgiving, filled with forgiveness and kindness, uplifting, providing us with our needs. And this is the side of the Godhead that that liberals prefer. They want a leader that is going to give to everyone, that is going to free them of college debt, is going to free them of the differences in socioeconomic differences, raise up the poor, give health care, equal health care to everyone. Next is an idea of Richard Block's that I've worked with him on that I think is very, very good. This idea that there is a difference in the way conservatives and liberals experience people on the spectrum of vertical versus horizontal. That liberals see people on a horizontal plane, that everyone is equal, or at least should be treated as such. And given the opportunity, if two individuals, say the liberal, are given the same opportunity, the same health care, the same education, the same food, that those two individuals will both have an equal ability to rise up in society to a level of success. So you often hear liberals talking about we need to help everybody, as opposed to we need to make our group great again. Liberals want to talk about how countries can work together. Conservatives want to talk about how America is the greatest, right? Which talks about where the conservative sees things on a vertical plane. They see that there are some groups that are better than, America is better than other countries, and there's some groups that are worse than, that there are some Americans that are better than and some that are worse than, some that are more deserving and some that are less deserving. So this is why the conservative can say, don't give free health care to everyone, because they believe that there are better people that have worked harder and are more pure, and they deserve better health care. And there are worse people who don't deserve as good of health care because the conservatives will say that they're lazy or they are ungrateful or they're not willing to work. The liberal says we need to give everyone a livable minimum wage. The conservative says no, the worst people, they need to work up to be able to deserve that pay rate. That some people that are wealthier, they're wealthier because they have greater purity or they have greater deserving. They are more deserving of that greatness that they're receiving. So when you hear the rhetoric of the two groups, one group says we need to take away guns so that everyone is equal in not having guns. The other group says we need to make sure that we are armed to protect ourselves from those unpure people. One group says we need women to be able to choose their own health care and how they want to take care of the body. The others say no, we need to create the most pure and religious and best choice for this woman. Some say, the liberal says, we should not have the death penalty because all people should be treated as equally. As kind, as good, as able to be redeemed. And the conservative says, no, we need the death penalty because that person needs to be punished. So we can see that there is a great difference between how the two individuals view the world. And if we go back and we watch the speeches of the Republican National Convention versus the Democratic National Convention, we quickly see the difference between an authoritarian perspective and an empathetic perspective, the difference between a disgust and a purity versus a openness to all people. We see a difference between trying to give people an even playing field versus giving people a ladder on which they can build up their business. The authoritarian worldview says, I want the government to punish the bad people, but otherwise, I want them to leave me alone and let me live my life. So the leader, the father, comes in to punish and then otherwise is outside of business. The liberal worldview says, I want the leader to redistribute, to raise people up, to give everybody opportunities, to help, right, throughout this. The conservative looks at that and says, that's them getting in the way, when really what they should be doing is leading wars, building military, doing what needs to do to make our country more pure and to punish the bad. So they're very different worldviews. And if we try and communicate from one worldview to the other using the language of this worldview, Well, that group looks racist and hateful. If we try and speak from this worldview to that worldview using our language, then we look at that group and think they're stupid, simple-minded, incapable of seeing the dangers ahead of them. So this group wants equality and fairness. This group wants opportunity and fairness, right, as well. So now that we understand that difference between those two, how can we be better at communicating across the aisle? Because both have pieces that are right, and both have pieces that are wrong. We have gone to a point where the two sides, instead of being centrist, are to the extremes. And there's still centrists out there, lots of them, that want more than anything for us to come together and work together as one successful nation. And I believe that's possible. So I'm Paul Draper. Thanks so much for watching this. I look forward to reading some of your comments. I'll talk to you soon.